Screenwriter Dave Ingham spent nearly 2 decades playing in bands before becoming one of the most prolific writers in children's television today. But interestingly, there's a lot of similarities between the life of a musician and screenwriter, namely living with uncertainty. Not knowing where your next script or gig is coming from, but loving it. That wild, exciting, imposter syndrome inducing life of being a professional artist. We talk about that and so much more. You're in for a special one. This is my conversation with Dave Ingham. Here we go. All right, this is the Story Series, the podcast for writers who break the rules. Dave Ingham, welcome.
Thank you very much, Brandon. It's lovely to be here.
You are an incredibly prolific screenwriter. Just a few of your credits. You've been head writer on Lucas the Spider, Betty Buys, The Sound Collector, Rah Rah the Noisy Lion, and written credits on many, many shows, including Chip and Potato, which is a personal favorite in our house here, Bob the Builder, the Koala Brothers. So all that is to say, once again, welcome, Dave. I'm excited to talk to you.
I can't wait to dive in.
You have a really unique background and a really unique way into screenwriting. And I find when I talk to writers and creatives, it's anything but a straight line. So I'd love to kind of connect the dots a little bit and just hear about your background, which is music. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. Oh gosh, from a very early age, I was really connected to music and art. So I was born in the Midlands in England, in Tamworth, and I went to art college in Manchester, and there instead of doing art and putting pen to paper so much, I'd bought a guitar and started playing in bands. I think that's what you're supposed to do at art college, I think. One of the things, anyway.
So what was the plan when you went into art college? You said, was it to be an artist?
Yeah, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but it was a time when you could just go there and find yourself and experiment and just experiment with all kinds of art, mix them up and meet like-minded people. And I think that's one of the
Yeah.
things that connects me really to everything that I've done. I've always been a freelancer. Very rarely have I sort of taken a monthly check, you know? So I've really taken that route, which I think probably horrifies many people. But for me, I find it really exciting, and you never know what's going to happen when you get out of that bed.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really interesting because you're speaking to what it means to live a creative life. And there's a lot of uncertainty in that you and I and people that do what we do deal with. And you seem to embrace it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've always loved change. I mean, and I've experienced change from a very young age. My parents split up, when I was sort of 11, 12, and I was brought up by my mum. Yeah, so that was a big changing experience for me. But we as a family embraced that, and with my father also. And that taught me a lot, I think, about a way forward. Then when you get little obstacles, you maneuver your way around them or embrace them.
Thinking of you as a writer now, were you writing songs in the band?
Yeah, very much so. That was my way in, really. It was as a songwriter.
Yeah.
I was a singer at the time as well, because that's where you can convey your lyrics. So it's all through necessity in that way to sort of get stuff out there. So we never played like in a covers band, other people's stuff. It was always our own stuff, which is the hard road, but it was also very fulfilling. But the other part of that was that I always felt like if we were playing our stuff, even after two or three sort of gigs, it felt like I was in a covers band playing this thing. I always liked the new stuff, and I think that was probably my downfall as a musician. I always really wanted to be in the studio playing new stuff, rather than going through the old back catalogue, you know?
Really interesting. So you were always wanting to push ahead and move forward and just kind of leave the things that you've done in the past and
Yeah, I mean, only sort of retrospectively looking at that, I could see myself doing that, and must have been very frustrating for the people around me. But I was always very much more at home, I think, in the studio than I was on stage performing. I
Oh, really?
certainly, and still now, I suffer imposter syndrome badly, and I think I certainly did then, that I didn't really sort of warrant being on the stage, but I certainly warranted being in a studio.
In a studio creating, writing new
Yeah,
music.
exactly. Yeah, and
Is
that's
there
where I felt very comfortable.
I was gonna say, is there I'm just connecting dots to being a freelancer in a room writing scripts.
Yeah, exactly that. And when I we'll go through maybe a little later and how I did that transition from
Yeah.
musician to writer, but it felt quite natural for me.
What was that transition like? What when did you know it was time to move on?
Yeah, I think inside, and you've just got to act upon that. And I think that's one of the things I can do very well is when I know when to move, and when to say, okay, that's enough. Let's move on to something else. I do that with books, with everything. I think, well, this isn't working. I'm not going to hang on there till the end. I'll cut and run, and I think it was very much that with music. I felt, I think I'd done enough. My life's changing. I had a child on the way with Louise and my wife, and I had to sort of change things up a little. That was a big change in my life. And it wasn't a case of sort of getting a proper job. I didn't really know how to do that. Uh, I certainly had to stop standing on smelly stages.
Right, right. Maybe keep more reasonable hours.
Yeah.
Um,
Always, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and how did you find your way to children's television?
God, no. Well, I had did a little bit of research. I haven't got a chronological brain, so I had to look into my and I did some research, and I was working on a show called Kipper for a company called Grand Slam Children's Films,
Yeah.
and the producer there was a guy called Ginger Gibbons, who were based on Mickey Penn's books, and the head of production there was Margot Marchant, and we were sort of struggling a little because Mick wrote the first 13 episodes. So we were struggling a little finding writers that he was happy with. We eventually found a great crew, but at the time we were really looking for a writer. It's kind of out of, I thought, well, it's a bit like writing a song, isn't it? But I'm very green at all this. So one day one night, I wrote a script, but I'd seen what scripts looked like. I hadn't experienced what writing one was like. So I adopted all the same processes of writing a song, though there wasn't any lyrics or anything or music as such at that point within the show. And I just wrote a song, a 10-minute song, as it were, that had to be balanced. So I just adopted all the principles that I did when I was a music writer to actually writing dialogue and a script. Um, and that's
I love
kind of
that.
and so the next stage was really that I took this script in without my name on it, um, and I showed it to Margot Marchant, who really championed me on this, and so did Ginger as well. And I gave it to them. He said, "Look, I've done this. What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'll just put it on the desk." And we put it in the desk, and I think Margot badgered Ginger a little bit to read it, and eventually they read it, and Mick read it, and they really liked it. And then they kind of realised it was me that had written it, and I was production managing the whole show at the same time. So then the question was, can you write and production manage? Wear the two hats. So I said, we'll give it a go, and I ended up writing pretty much half of the series, never once changing the way that I'd written. I adopted the same process of having musical instruments all around me, playing playing the actual script through just with a guitar or something with me that was musical, so I could find a balance if it had a resonance and a balance. And I still do that now, even on a feature film. I always surround myself with musical instruments to find that balance, especially when it's dialogue.
So I that is so fascinating to me. So you literally back then and now will pick up a guitar and do you brainstorm? Do you read your script out loud while you're playing? What does that look like?
Sometimes I'll just read it. but I'll just be playing the guitar and just feel it, and I'll get a feel really of the ebb and flow of the script if I think something's jumping out, or as we like to say, waking us up when you think that's not quite there, and trying to find a way of navigating my way through that. Generally, and then going back to the musical process. Sometimes I don't need that. I mean, the longer I've
Right.
been doing this now for nearly 30 years, I've not had to fall back onto the musical instruments so much, but I still do use them, especially when I've got a problem with the scripts or something needs fixing, or it just doesn't feel like it's balancing right. I'll use musical instruments.
And you'll find where something like the pacing is off.
Yeah, the pacing can be off, the crescendo of it can be off, the way the characters are interacting, they could be off if the
Wow.
dialogue doesn't feel natural. And so yeah, and it's just a tonal thing that just it's like my tonal support network, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. I don't have a music background, although I do love music, and I have always thought that in my experience writing, children's television, especially short scripts, because sometimes they are 15 pages or, 10
Yeah.
pages, depending, there is a rhythm to the writing and to the dial there is almost a musical rhythm, or there's a kind of an aspect of poetry to it because it's an economy of words, which is
Yes.
very, I imagine, similar to, like you're saying, songwriting. And so
Yeah,
you're just kind of literalizing that in some way with just picking up a guitar and say, yeah, this is very connected. And this is just your brain at work.
exactly. No, you're absolutely right, man. But the other part of it as well is that script has to be a performance as well.
Yeah.
The person that's reading it, you're performing to them within that script, or your characters certainly are. And I think that's another part of what drew me to that and why I kind of adopted from the off that sort of technique, really, because I was still in some kind of weird way performing.
Yeah. And that's just like you in the studio working on a song, by yourself. It's just now it's a script.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
And the
Wow.
great thing is I got more contrast doing kids TV.
Yeah, right, right. Well, and you found that you had it clearly had a knack for it, writing uh half of the show, right, of Kipper, and then kind of going on from there. Do you find that like now you were on that path?
Yeah, it felt very natural for me to be that kind of a writer, and I wrote, I say, sort of family to kids. But all my favourite films really are family to kids. From the Goonies, and I ended up writing things like Pingu, which I adored.
Right.
I was a big fan, and I got the chance to write on a reboot of Pingu, do hot animation. Jackie Coppel was directing at the time, and that was fantastic experience. Shaun the Sheep as well. I'm a massive Arden fan. On
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was and I also found that Stop Frame, as you mentioned, Rah Rah, a Noisy Lion, Curtis's Rah Rah. Stop Frame also is a big place in my heart. Really, it's very tactile. Um, and I love non-dialogue as well. There's something about it all. Again, it's very musical, and draws me to it. It really does.
Yeah. And there's in stop frame that I'm assuming it's like stop motion is you're saying like
Yes.
using your hands. And that's something that before you started writing scripts you talked about you were painting
Yeah.
and doing like
Yes.
just using your hands. You said it was a very analog process those early animation days going from music and now and so that's very important to you. Is just
Mhm.
using your hands.
Yeah. Absolutely, and constantly evolving as well. I think we should, I wake up and think I know nothing, and then try and fill my head. Sounds a bit weird, but it's kind of works for me. That keeping my eyes open really, and just taking things on, learning new things.
Well, it's funny that you say that, waking up and feeling like you know nothing. I've often thought that it's very important as we gain experience in our craft and what we do to maintain as best we can a beginner's mindset
Yeah.
because that is eyes open. That means you're absorbing and you're learning and you're kind of humbling yourself before your own craft and the more you kind of think like an expert, I think you risk eyes being closed and tunnel vision. And I think we all kind of go through back and forth sometimes, but the way you're describing your process seems very much like you're in that beginner's mindset. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, there's nothing more exciting than starting with that kind of blank page, and
Yeah.
where it's going to take you and where those characters take. I still, it sounds a bit creepy, but I'll still sit on a bus and listen to conversations, so not obviously, but just
No, but
yeah, how the to and fro of how a conversation works. One
yeah.
person will be the other one person will be talking a lot. So it's never like dialogue ping pong. It never really is like that's not what conversations about. And I always try and place that within my scripts if I can. Just working on who's the more dominant character and who has got the most to say and who's the more receptive character. And just working in that way. And whenever people ask me tips, which is sometimes people do, that's one of the things I'll say. Just try and listen if you can to how people talk to each other. It's really important.
You have been a head writer on multiple shows. Can you talk about how you read a script, the kinds of things that you look for? You talked about when you're writing who the dominant character is in a scene. What else do you look for when you read a script?
Yeah, balance, certainly. And that's, again, I'll read a script through and I'll probably have a guitar in my hand doing that or a ukulele or something. Just balance. And it's just feeling that instrument in my hand. I can then read and it's a comfort to that. And I get more into a lyrical mode. Um, and then I just wait for things to wake me up. Does that sound? It sounds a bit weird. Somebody told me that he was a Foley engineer, and he said when they're doing scores, writing scores stuff, said, and they're listening back on an edit, they wait to be something to wake them up, and if something wakes them up, they know that it probably doesn't belong there. And so
Huh.
once you get woken up, as it were, then you can dig into that. But if something's flowing beautifully, I tend to try and leave it alone as much as I can.
Going over your credits, just how you mentioned being a kind of a lifelong freelancer and just how prolific you've been. Can you talk about the other side of a writing career, which is the networking, the hustling, the going after work? How have you approached that in your career?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm naturally quite a shy person, so this is probably the only I don't really talk about myself a great deal. So I find that actually quite hard. You'd find that maybe somebody fronted a band would find that sort of a weird thing to say, but a lot of people that do those are exposed in that way are generally really shy people. It's just
Yeah.
a thing that
Yeah.
they can fit into. So yeah, I've always found it, but because I worked on the inside of animation and film, but, on the other side of the fence, as it were, in production. That helped me a lot. It helped me understand production, so I could speak to storyboard artists and animators. So that is one of the ways that I've always sort of worked my way into the industry, is from a production standpoint. Um, sure, I've got great friends who are script writers and producers, and I've got great friends, at the BBC and other companies that yeah, have championed me all along the way, which has been wonderful. And I have a brilliant agent, Rebecca Watson, I just want to shout out, who's been with me for nearly 30 years. So we've got, I think, it's always very hard at the start, especially if you're quite shy, and especially if you've come into the industry without qualification, as it were, to actually break into, a networking situation. And I found it took me a long time to do that. But once I did, and I found the courage, in a way, the courage to do it, I found it quite easy because
Yeah.
generally you don't talk about film, you talk about anything other than film, and that was my way in as well.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is you describing relationships over
Yeah,
time that you've developed that ultimately that is kind of what um, helps sustain a creative career is just building those relationships and you find that that is something that has helped you?
Very much so, and it's very important as well. The relationships, how people have helped me in the industry. In 2000, my wife was very ill, and she died in 2009. So, so my trajectory, if we're going to talk about film, of course, it's extraordinarily heartbreaking time for myself and my two sons. And our trajectories in the way we were going to see our life flow completely changed. And I think one of the things that I learned from that and experienced from that was that the industry that I was in and the people that worked in this industry were extraordinarily kind. Um, they went above and beyond, not just supply work for me and giving me the elasticity to work and bring up a family on my own, but also just time, kindness to talk. Um, and for me, that is something that I will never ever forget. And I owe a huge gratitude of debt to the industry internationally, who've, to a person, been extraordinarily kind to me and my family, and myself and my family and my boys and all my sort of my mother, all of those wonderful people that are in our lives that generally aren't part of your work. I feel certainly are part of my work.
Wow. Wow. There is a reputation here in Los Angeles too, where the animation community is a nicer bunch of people, uh, generally speaking. Yeah, yeah. And that it does feel like a close-knit bunch.
It does. It's a family, and that family's being added to all the time, and that's great. I mean, we go to is in Sheffield. We have a children's media conference every year, and I try and go every year. And I have my children's media conference buddies who I'll never see any other time of year. I just fly out
Yeah.
of my little town and go to Sheffield, and we have a ball. And but it is so important to know that there is. It's not just about work. It's about friendship, about connection, and about also giving back and helping. I try and mentor as much as I can. I was
Mm.
over in Dingle, doing helping out with students out there, and I've been given a lot, and I really should give back more. I feel.
Yeah. Eh, in your mentorship, are there things that you find yourself saying to the up and comers over and over again, or perhaps things that the up and comers worry about that they don't need to waste time worrying about?
Yeah, my big one is really the idea that there are a lot of books out there, and you can read a lot of books about theory, and a lot of them are saying pretty much the same thing. Some of them are quite extraordinary, like Stephen King's On Writing, which is more of a memoir, I think, and it's a great book. I tell you, all these books are really have a worth, but don't use them as something to write with. Use them as something to fall back on. They're there as a,
Ooh.
they're there for your technique and as a tool. Use yourself as the way of pushing forward and finding your voice. And you'll only do that by writing and writing and writing. If you get stuck, sure, have a look back into some of these manuals and some of these books. They've got a lot to say and they can help you. But that's not your starting point. That's where you need to go if you need help. You know, use yourself. If you'll know your voice. You'll know if something feels true to yourself. You really will, and you'll find it. You really will.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. It's not something to write with, it's something to fall back on.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not saying there's no worth of them. They're great. They really
Sure.
are, and I've read many of them. But at the end of the day, the exciting thing is walking that tightrope yourself, and that is where you'll find the gold.
I'm curious about in reading scripts, common mistakes that you find over and over.
Yeah, my main one really is too much dialogue. I mean, I did say I really love non-dialogue.
Yeah.
I know the older age group we get into, we need more dialogue, and sometimes, but I like to break that dialogue up. We don't speak in monologues. We speak very snappily. So you can have, 2 pages of really snappy dialogue that really move things on. But yeah, that's probably my area. Really, is dialogue. And when you working, say, with a really young age group, you start having, three different ideas on one set of dialogue. Just keep it really simple. Simple's hard. It's really tough. Um, and it's a great way to hone your craft. Is write really simply, because we're all, we're grown-ups. I'm trying to sort of get into the mind of a very small child, and write in the way that they might think takes quite a lot of energy, really. So I find writers for preschool especially extraordinarily good and talented in that way, that they can write in a very simple way that says a lot and allows the animation to say a lot.
It's interesting, and just hearing you talk about your process, and I can't help but keep connecting dots between a musician and a writer. And I'm wondering if you can speak to additional similarities or things that from your days of music that you still incorporate into your process now. You talked about finding the rhythm using a guitar. In what other ways are those two worlds kind of similar?
Yeah, I think certainly with genre and the way that you do musical effects, you write those into a script. Certainly using genre in that way. Um, the other thing that I really love to use is Foley and effects. And silence. Silence is your best tool there, and I think a whole page of silence with just action for me is just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
That's fascinating. It seems so interesting that a musician who you can think of as someone who creates sound, speaking and advocating for the importance of no sound,
Yeah.
which
So
is just as important.
yeah. When I worked on the sound collector, someone
Right.
said to me, there's no such thing as no sound. We're all part of sound. And I think that's true. We're all part of sound. It's all around us. So there is no such thing as silence. A beat. Sure, there's a beat. That's a pregnant pause of dialogue, perhaps. But there's no such thing as no sound. It's just different atmospheres. And I think looking at, say, Studio Ghibli are superb, absolutely superb at creating atmosphere. And I think that is another thing you can bring in with that musical approach is atmosphere of the page. And I think that's something I hope, and I really, really do hope that I bring to a script, especially when I'm writing on, say, like a feature film.
If people are wanting to embark on a creative life, what do you think they need to be prepared for?
Prepare to be attacked by yourself.
Prepared to be attacked by yourself?
Yeah, your imposter syndrome. I don't know anybody who hasn't got it. I rife with it. It's just there with me all the time. And I've learned to love it. And I think that's kind of, your doubts, we don't learn anything through success. We learn through failure and all those trial and errors that we do. And I think we're living in a world where trial and error, there's less time for that. Um, but I think it's a really important part of your armory, really, as a writer. Trial and error, getting things wrong, experimenting with things. Prepare to do all that and prepare for that little devil on your shoulder to wag its finger at you, and say that you're rubbish and you're not. And people can't see in your head all those things that you think, that self doubt. It's really important that you have them because that's what drives you on. You've got to prove it wrong.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that was an incredibly uh, well said, and I think that some people have asked about just the writer life, and I think that the word, and I hear this in the kind of subtext of what you're saying is acceptance. You accept your imposter syndrome. You accept that devil on your shoulder, and then you move forward in spite of that. You don't try to push that aside or deny it because it is real. And the uncertainty that you were alluding to earlier, but there's an excitement to it. Would you say?
Yeah, very much so. That's what makes it fun, I think. Sometimes it makes it impossibly hard, but a lot of
Yes.
no, it really does. For me, not so much because I've got tools, I think, in the shed that I can use now for being so long in the tooth in this game that I can utilize. But I think when you're first starting out, it's pretty daunting. So, and the other thing I would say, if you're just starting out as well, is ask. Ask with the writers. There's generally a really friendly lot who don't get asked questions enough. So I think, you know, certainly with me to start, if you bump into me anywhere, or anybody wants to reach out, always ask because we're a friendly lot, and I think we all have a common aim, and to
Yeah.
quietly entertain.
Yes. Yes. Uh, Dave, do you have a moment in your career that you're proudest of?
I think my proudest moment was, or the favourite thing I'd ever written on. There was two things, and they both occurred in the Bristol part of the UK. And this is not to rubbish any of the other things that I've worked on, but one was in 2012 during the Olympics. We got, I think it was 27,000 children. It worked out in the end to send in their ideas, images, and it was with Aardman. We made a film called The Itch of the Golden Knit, which is based on one of their titles, based on their ideas, drawings. It's fantastic. It really was beautiful. Um, so that is, and showing that in Trafalgar Square with everybody during the Olympics was a great moment. The other thing I think really kind of affected me in a way was working on just a small short on how to teach children how to um, be still during radiotherapy. And it was so successful. Emma Lazenby was the director. She's wonderful, based down in Bristol. Um, and it was so successful. It's for the Bristol Health Trust, I think. I could have got that wrong. But it was so successful, just a small animation that they made into DVDs for adults as well. Um,
Huh.
it was just a great thing, and there's no money in it for anyone. It was just a
Yeah.
wonderful thing to do, and it was successful. It worked, and that's just a shows you that what we do can really work.
What and teaching children to be still during radiotherapy, is that like
Yeah,
treating illness, treating cancer?
treating illness, treating cancer, yeah, and it was voiced by other
Oh.
children into that process, which was completely humbling. Um, and the fact that, the children are it was very important. I know Emma went into the radiotherapy center and recorded the sounds. It's very because the kids are alone, you can't go near them because they're being treated, with
Oh.
laser.
Oh.
So, and they just, we recorded the sounds, we recorded, dialogue from kids who've been through the process, which called it empowered and gay emboldened adults to do it as well. And it's just a
Gosh.
small thing. Emma's direction was astonishing on that. Yeah.
Both of your examples were about reaching children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're great. Kids are great. And
Ah, wow.
I've been
That's
very
beautiful.
okay, we've had tragedy and there's not a day goes by I don't miss Lou. But I've got two boys who are now men. One's down in Mexico doing something. I don't know what he's up to. But they're having great fun. But they're kind and they're doing what they want to do, and they are the greatest thing that I've ever achieved by a country mile. They really are. But yeah, and observing them as children and them observing me as a flawed adult was something that um, I think enriched us all,
Mm.
retrospective. Yeah.
That's beautiful, Dave. That's beautiful. Um, as we come to a close, I like to ask everybody the same question going out, which is, Dave, what is a rule in our industry that you believe is worth breaking?
Gosh, that's a really interesting one. A rule in the industry worth breaking. If somebody passes on your idea but wants to give you advice on it anyway, don't take it.
And that sounds like you're speaking from experience.
Yeah, to a certain extent. It's just if you didn't want it, you don't like it, why would you want to change it? You're not going to change it so I can come back to you and give it to you. Just continue what you believe in. Of course, we have to adapt things. Everything's early development. Of course, it is. When somebody comes into your camp, takes your piece on, takes your project on, and develops it with you, there's nothing more wonderful than that. But if somebody just says, no, it's not what we want, what you could do is this, had to change it to make it more, no,
Yeah.
that's what it is. And if you didn't want it, that's fine. And absolutely, I can live with that. And maybe somebody else can live with this as it is, because that's the clear vision that it was.
Dave, this was so fascinating, so insightful to get a look into your creative mind and how you approach your work. And this was just great. And thank you for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Brandon. It's been great fun.
Attention writers, I'm hosting my first virtual screenwriting workshop. It's called The Hero's Journey from Film to Television. We're going to be drawing from examples from my own work, writing and developing animated series for Disney and Netflix, but specifically looking at how the hero's journey can be adapted across mediums, across worlds, across audiences. It's going to be a lot of fun. Dates and details in the bio. Hope to see you there.